Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you on this Friday morning. Got a great show in store for you today. You see the SEC background. That's our new set. Part of it, we're slowly but surely building this thing. We are going to start off with Chris Lee, the Southeastern 14 Vandy Rivals up in Nashville. Second segment, we will be joined by Coach John Brady, formerly head basketball coach at Samford, LSU to the Final Four in Arkansas State. He is one of the smartest basketball minds out there. He's been at SEC Media Day over in Mountain Brook at the Bohemian Hotel, and going to have a lot to talk about with that. I know you've seen it on SEC Network, all the interviews and all. One thing Coach Brady can do is he can go talk to these coaches in ways that mere mortals cannot, because he's been in their shoes, and he does a great job of explaining basketball, what's going on, why things happen. Love having him on here. Hour number 2, Bo Carter, National Football Foundation, will check in with us. He'll be talking along with Yancy Porter. Rebel Yell Hotline is going to be with us as well. Ken Capps having to take the day off today. Normally on here with us, Football Writers Association of America. So look, we're here 6 days a week, 25 shows a month, at least 300 shows a year. We ain't part-time podcasting. We're doing it all the time. Repetition is the mother of all skill. Get the best guests you can find, put the ball in their hands, engage them, and let them go. That's what I'm going to do with Chris Lee. Chris, I love that background, man. See my new set here in the background?
I was going to ask, how might someone get one of those? Those are pretty neat.
Yeah, I've got a friend and her husband, Brenda, down in Batesville, Mississippi. They've got barnwood and cedar all over their farm, and she is super talented, and I can get you one of these. She made this for me and then by hand carved it, and I'll get you the information to get one of those. You notice already what's the biggest thing on there?
Texas.
And I'm going to ask you this, Chris, because next year when we all go to Dallas for media days at the Omni, are we going to come into Dallas? There'll be a huge sign that says Texas welcomes in small print the Southeastern.
that seems appropriate, right?
Yeah. But I'll get you the information to get one of these. This is so cool. I got to get a track light for it. But man, one of my friends saw it and he goes, "It looked so good. I thought it was a chocolate cake." So I was like, I'm getting hungry. But man, can you believe it? Week 8 already. College football is here, and you do an awesome job every day covering all these games. So let's talk about this weekend and your thoughts.
Well, first of all, you know it's getting late in the season when it's SEC Basketball Media Day, which I was also at. Getting ready for that. But yeah, I mean, this is when the fun starts. I think that I don't know that I could go back and say this with certainty, but it feels like we're at a point with SEC and NCAA football that I never remember it being more competitive. You've got, I think, according to ESPN's FPI, you got, I think it's 18 teams, 17 or 18. They got a 0.5% shot or better at making the college football playoff. I think you've got 10 or 11 of those have got a 10% shot or better. You got Georgia and Alabama, like in the 8-9 range in terms of where the computers place them. So that's kind of a new and different thing, but yet they're not.
Yeah.
I think there's like 5 points that separates number 1 from number 10 in most of these computers. So we said going into the year that we might have some NFL-like parity, and I think that's kind of where we are heading into this weekend.
Yeah, and we talked about it yesterday when Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, was on the show with us, and that next year, when you think about it, in November, every team in the top 25 is going to be saying, hey, there's a chance we make this 12-team playoff. I think it's great for college football going forward.
Oh, I think it's wonderful. I think that there's some things in the way that the sausage is made that I'm not crazy about with the tampering and the portal and things like that. And I think eventually those can be cleaned up, hopefully. But I do like the product and the parity and the fact that we're not sitting here. I mean, honestly, before every year, it's kind of like, here's 3 or 4 teams that can win the national title, and that's it, right? And it's that way going in, it's that way coming out. This year, I don't know what the number is, but it's not 3 or 4, and it's great to see.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of people who said you're just going to water it down. I don't agree with that. I think competition's the spice of life. Another thing is, you and I are about the same age. When we were growing up, you had a smaller field in the NCAA basketball tournament. Used to be, there was one team in a conference, 2 teams that would get it. Now, every game, there's interest on there. So I think it also sends a message to everybody else, ramp up your program. You got not easier, but there's 3 times as many spots.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Florida Atlantic made the Final Four last year, and we've had a few of those here and there. Butler was, although that was a different era, Butler went to the title game a couple times, and Gonzaga is a power. I mean, it really is a completely different world where it's not just the powers assert their wills and just run over everybody else.
Yeah, and even last year, there were people that were criticizing the Final Four with San Diego State and Florida Atlantic. While I'm doing backflips going, this is great. You think they don't care about basketball out in San Diego or down in South Florida? No, I mean, look, I'm an Auburn grad. I want to see Auburn winning everything. Doesn't always happen. But you can tell when you do a show like what you do and I do, every guest we have on here, their fan base cares just as much. And we need that in sports. And you got to earn it. You're not going to be given anything, but people out in Oregon, at Oregon State, they're not going to be in the Pac-12, whatever they're going to call it next year, but they got a pretty good program right now. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's better when, look, the top end storylines, the Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or somebody like that, they're fun. They're interesting in their own way because you want to see if a juggernaut can keep it going. At the same time, as a fan of a team, you don't want to feel like your team is out of it. And I think what NIL has done and all those things is it's given everybody a shot. Like in the NFL, if your team's terrible, well, guess what? You might get the first pick of the draft the next year. In college sports, it is the opposite. If your team is terrible, it's harder to recruit to that. Yeah, I think we are seeing the evening out of the playing field. I mean, in the SEC this year, I don't know. I think the difference between number 1 and number 10 or 11 on a neutral field is maybe 10, 11 points. I don't know that we've ever seen that. Again, the national picture, 1 through 10, there's about a 5-point difference. This is an unprecedented era for college sports.
It is. And when you look around last Saturday morning, and we on Saturday, we always do a roundtable. Buddy Martin was on from GatorAdeMedia.com, and he said, raise your hand. There were 5 of us. He said, raise your hand if you stayed up late last night to watch Colorado and Stanford. And everybody did. And he goes, wow.
Yeah.
He goes, I did too. And it was 2:15 for Buddy down in Ocala.
Ooh.
Whatever Dion is or isn't, but he's making people excited in Colorado and, about things about like college football. And that's, 9.6 million people watched Colorado State, Colorado. I think the year ago comps on that were 1.3 million. If you're a publicly traded company and you can go to your shareholders and your board and say, we increased numbers from 1.3 to 9.6, you're getting a raise.
Yeah, no, the flip side of that is I do think that the constant roster turnover, and I feel like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth here, but like when we grew up watching baseball, you could kind of say, all right, the Dodgers infield this year is this or whatever. And there was some continuity with the teams from you.
Yes.
We were watching SEC basketball. You'd be like, okay, Georgia's got this point guard who's a freshman, and you pretty much knew he'd be their point guard through their senior year. And you knew the names and the faces. every year we're having to do this ridiculous amount of season prep and going, okay, there's 3 guys off this team that were here last year and one of them barely played. And we lather, rinse, repeat for most of the teams in the league, other than maybe Texas A&M and Tennessee to some degree this year. There's a couple others, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I do think if we could get some sort of continuity and familiarity back, the game would be even better. And I think there's some fans that get turned off by that. But like you said, nobody had all those people watching a Colorado game that late at night on the bingo card. The ratings for that product are incredible. That they're getting some of the top ratings and things. And look, again, I don't like turning over 86 players or whatever it was either. I don't think that's good for the game.
No.
But he has also tapped into something that's interesting and compelling. And so finding the balance between all those extremes, I hope that college football can find that, because I think there's some seeds of some very interesting things here.
Yeah. And I'll use the term, it is a diametrically opposing dilemma about the portal. You hate it, you love it. But what's hard is Deion Sanders came in and he said, my job is to, clean house and to win games, but there are no guarantees. I mean, I remember in college when at the end of the year, everybody had meetings with their head coach and their position coaches, and they showed you where you fit in on the depth chart. And sometimes they'd say, there's not a number 7 spot on the chart, so I think you ought to, focus on your major of electrical engineering or whatever, and go do that. And people understood that, you're not going to get everything you want, but you better try to get everything you want. And I think that when I look at the portal, you're right. We followed Major League Baseball. Golly, think about the Cincinnati Reds in the 70s, the Big Red Machine. You knew Johnny Bench and that crew. They were there for years. And somehow college football, though, Tony Barnhart's right. Not even the adults can mess it up. But you're right. It is. We do feel like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth. I mean, I will say this. Lane Kiffin's comment about, the portal, how he talks, and he said it's different because in the past you had a bunch of guys that had been there 4 or 5 years. Now you got guys coming and going, and you don't know who you can really count on a lot of times, and that makes it hard as a coach.
Yeah, I think I can summarize a lot of it with this. Okay, here is my concern. It's lack of continuity. It's kids not getting degrees. And by the way, we had a show, I think it was last Friday, with a guy named Tyler Siskey. He does a podcast with Neil McCready, who runs Ole Miss's rival site.
Yeah.
Tyler has been on a couple of SEC staffs, Ole Miss, Auburn, Alabama, played at Auburn, and he is a tell it like it is guy. He has got common sense. I think he's a good dude. He had a lot of ideas in the last half of that show, and you can go find it on our YouTube channel from last week at Southeastern 14. I think the back half of that, the whole thing was good, talking about some of the issues around college football and some of the climate in the SEC, but the back half dealt a lot with how do you fix this? What would you do? And one of the things that I said was I feel like the climate is enabling a lot of bad actors. In other words, if you want to build a program through tampering, through all those sorts of things that I don't think are good to the game, right now the climate has kind of done that. So, like, how do we get back to having a place where we're enabling the good actors? You saw Jay Wright get out of college basketball, I think, because of a lot of this. I think you'll see more coaches eventually follow if this doesn't get fixed at some point. So there's that. And then there's the other hand, where, look, we all know that NIL, in air quotes here, has been around for a long time, right? You had programs that did it. They did it through, a lot of times, the churches. They did it through a lot of places that it was against the rules, but the NCAA could never catch anybody. And every now and then they'd find some low-hanging fruit out there and make an example of people. And the worst and repeat offenders kept getting away with stuff. And look what happened, or maybe didn't happen with Kansas basketball this week.
Yeah.
As an example. So I think you now have a system to where a lot of the things that used to be against the rules that the powers used to build their programs are now in play.
Yeah.
They're fair game, but you haven't figured out this way to do it in a way that empowers the good people to build programs and act in kids' best interests and actually graduate, because how many credits are these kids losing? And college is not getting cheaper, although I guess they're getting it paid for the most part. But here's what I'm getting at. I've always kind of wondered what this would look like. You and I are both free market guys.
Yeah.
If you could open it up and just see what it looks like if everything's off limits and legal, and now you're kind of seeing what it looks like. Now you're hearing coaches say, hey, we need transparency. We need this. One of Tyler's ideas he had was, I think that the transfer thing needs to be changed to where if a kid transfers, he sits out a year. That stops some of this, and he gets an exemption if there's a coaching change. But the catch is he's got to stick around a semester. And in other words, if you make a change in December, you got to go through the spring semester before you transfer in the summer. I think those are some good ideas that can clean it up. Again, I like a lot of what has happened. I'm in favor of kids getting paid because they were already anyway. But there needs to be a lot of guardrails around it that aren't there, that I think in a lot of ways are ruining the product and again, enabling the bad actors.
Yeah. And you have to, I've seen in businesses where people are paid up front to make a move from one company to another. Usually there's a 5-year contract that goes with that, and you got to hit certain performance levels to get that, or you have to pay that money back. I like to see what these contracts with NIL look like, because again, as a financial advisor, on top of doing this show 6 days a week, 32 years and counting, we've never had a family with $50, $75, $100 million ever once. Probably because they know we would go crazy, but ever once give out money to their young children. It's all age banded and incentive-based trust. And I cannot, I've seen what happens when people do die and they didn't have an estate plan. If you die without a will, the legal term is dying as cheat. That's what lawyers tell me. But an unplanned estate is like two farmers fighting over a milk cow. One's pulling on the head, one's pulling on the tail, and the lawyer's milking the cow. Get a lawyer to do it for you. Well, same thing with NIL. The colleges would be better off, and I think people would be more likely to support it if they said, okay, that kid, if he stays, he gets this, this, and this. He's also got to have a certain GPA. Nobody just gets money for nothing.
Yeah.
So after your first year, you got to have this many hours completed and all that. And if you don't do it, you don't get the money. That's how it's going to work. We don't need Congress to tell us that.
No,
those guys could screw up a 2-car funeral, man.
Oh yeah. Don't get me started on that. John Calipari said something interesting, and I've heard this a lot of places, but he was the one that was pushing this harder than anybody at Media Days. He says all deals need to be transparent and reported where everybody can see what it looks like. And if you're a coach and you don't comply, you need to be banned for a year from the sport. And I don't know that he's wrong. No, that got a lot of laughs and things like that. But I think the substance of the comment, if he's not on it, he's close. Number two, and I don't know why you never had this. You really need a commissioner for every sport. Find a Nick Saban type or someone who will run college football or run it effectively. I don't know if the players have an association or what that representation looks like, but I think it needs to look more like pro sports or run in those regards and less like this free-for-all that it is now.
Yeah, because there are very few people really getting that much money too. That's another thing. And, we had an Arkansas player who was a walk-on, 18, 19, 20, and 21. So he saw it for 3 years without NIL and his last year with NIL. He said he was a walk-on, but he played a good bit. And he said, you can lose the locker room real fast. You start losing 3, 4, 5 games in a row, guys will check out, because they're going to go, hey, I got an NIL deal. So that's what you got to guard against. So I think, again, the free market works it out. Man, I remember the build up to Y2K and the company I was working for at the time, AG Edwards, we spent 5 years prepping for it. And when it came, it was a non-event, kind of like, the last ice age. I mean, it just happened. But I really believe what's going on here. And I want to go back to this question, throw it at you. Go Doors from Chris. Is Clark Lee on the hot seat? I can't imagine he would be, but I want to know why they've gone backwards from the progress they made last year, because you're close to the Vandy program, Vandy rivals, and also you'll tell the truth.
He's not on the hot seat. I think he's going to get 5 years. Look, that program, first of all, I think they and the school have done in some ways an inadequate job. I mean, the facilities are there. They did not have an NIL plan that was based anything in reality. Some of that's on Clark. Some of that is on other people at the school. But, he took over a mess, as I've said before. It wasn't – I was talking to someone who's kind of a consultant and familiar with that, and he knows a lot of the same things I know. But he said it wasn't like he took over at 0. He took it over to -2. And so I think that when Clark took the job, NIL was coming into play. They had stuff to deal with and navigate that no other school in the SEC was navigating. Plus now you have this facilities thing, which, they're finally catching up to where they should have been 15 or 20 years ago. But I think that there's only so much that a coach can drinking from a fire hose isn't even the right analogy. It's like drinking from 3 of them. You got to pick which one. And look, I'm not making excuses. I don't think their coaching's been good. I think you may see a change in at least one coordinator, probably some other coaches, and I think that's needed. I think at times there's maybe a little bit of stubbornness on his part in how they built the program. I think they're going to have to get more active in the portal. I just don't think they have a choice. There's a lot of stuff that needs changing, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what the offseason looks like for them. But no, I don't think he's on the hot seat.
I don't either. I like him. I think the thing that really made me like him was when he got angry not angry, but just sort of miffed when someone said 5 and 7, you got to be happy. He's like, no, we won. Yeah. That's the sign that you got the right guy. He's a competitor. Yeah. And that's look, living in Memphis, I've got a lot of Vanderbilt friends, a lot of my family. I've told you this, and they have a lot of people with a lot of money, but again, so does Texas. So does Texas A&M. Money in the problem. When you look at the boosters, and my friends Bill and Sheila James, their son Christian James, is Christian playing much now? Is he back?
Yeah, he's in the rotation.
Good. And I think hopefully he'll come back next year. I mean, I wonder nowadays if a guy's a 4th-year junior, does that mean he has 2 more years left because of the virus rules? I mean, it's perpetual. It's like some of these guys. Yeah, it's kind of like Tommy Boy, college for 7 years. He goes, yeah, most people go to college for 7 years are doctors.
Well, I mean, here's what's confusing. I'll give you an example. Vanderbilt's quarterback situation. You've got AJ Swan started the season as the quarterback. Ken Seals is the quarterback now, has been the starter for the last 3 games, and not based on information, but just based on the way he's played. My guess is he's the starter against Ole Miss next week. Well, people talk about AJ Swan being the quarterback of the future, and maybe he is, but here's the thing. Seals had been on campus for 2 years before Swan had been on campus. And yet they have the same amount of eligibility left. Seals played in 2020. He gets or passed for that. He redshirted last year, gets another year for that. So he's actually got 2024 and 2025 to play. AJ Swan is exhausted his eligibility for 2022 and 2023. So he's got 24 and 25 to play also, unless they redshirt him. So you got 2 quarterbacks with 2 years difference that may both finish college at the same time.
I mean, it's some of these guys at BYU that are out for 2 years for their mission. I mean, you're talking some 8 and 9 year college careers.
Yeah.
That's, you're talking, well, I know Christian James already has, I think he's working on a master's in the Owen College of Business Marketing, what have you, at Vanderbilt. I mean, that kid has the work ethic of a dozen Mennonite farmers, and he's very smart, and he's got a black belt in Taekwondo and a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, and trains with mixed martial arts at 6'5", 290. keep him on your side is all I can say. but he's
Yeah,
going to be
yeah.
great in the business world. I mean, that's the thing. All right, let me ask you this. You were, if I'd love for you to stay on, because you were at Basketball Media Days. I did not get to go down there, but Coach John Brady is going to be on with us in about 5-6 minutes. Love to get your thoughts, because I love college basketball like you do. And growing up in Nashville, Bryce Drew was the first coach ever to be at Vanderbilt when they had a losing season at Memorial Gymnasium. But in Nashville, the social thing to do is to go to Vanderbilt basketball. Now, if you can explain to me, why they have the benches on the opposite ends of the court, but you know what? That's why we love college sports, because of weird stuff like that. But
I can give you an explanation if you'd like it.
All right. Yeah, I want to hear.
Okay. When they built that building or came up with the plans, it was either the late 40s or the early 50s. It was not long after World War II. And Vanderbilt at the time had always been pretty pedestrian in basketball. And the school I'm not going to swear this is fact, but this is the way that I've heard it. The school allegedly was trying to make a decision at the time on whether it wanted to continue with basketball or not. And so it hedged its bets, and it built Memorial Gym, which was built as a combination basketball gym and opera house, which explains, I don't know if you've been in there, I'm sure. If you sit on the front rows, the playing floor hits you about chest high.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, like, if you were to put the benches on the sides, you're going to block the views of thousands of people. Apparently, from an engineering standpoint, you can't just move the floor down. I don't know what all the things, and it's driving my dog crazy. So my apologies.
I
this is a daily feature of our Southeastern 14 and Vandy Sports podcast. Julio loses his mind at some point.
Is that a police car or a fire truck going by?
It could be anything. But yes, good grief. Okay. So what they did is they built it kind of hedging their bets. Okay, it's going to work for this and it's going to work for that. And you literally cannot put people on the sidelines without blocking a bunch of views, which is why the benches are on the ends of the floor. And the other complicating factor, I don't know how much this plays in, if you do major renovations to that gym, like air conditioning has been one thing that's talked about for a long time. The federal laws with ADA compliance, I think you've got to build in a bunch of things for handicapped people and things that are going to cost them probably millions, tens of millions of dollars. So every time you address something, it ticks off a bunch of federal boxes that you got to hit this and this and this too if you do that. So I think those are a lot of the reasons they are where they are.
Yeah, there you go. Because my dad being an architect, I always ask him these things, and he's like, "Well, architects can design it, engineers make it work. Mechanical engineer makes it work. FedEx has a lot of mechanical engineers that work for them, and their job is to say, how are we going to put 80,000 pounds of freight on this 777 to go from London to Jakarta or to Beijing or Borneo or, Port Moresby? And it's amazing what engineers do. And I love it. But let's do this. If you can stay on with us, Chris, we're going to talk some serious basketball and then get back to football and HR-2. But we're going to take a quick break before Coach Brady joins us. Well, what a great place to have it, too, there in Mountain Brook. That's one of the most beautiful towns in anywhere that you'll find. So we'll take this quick break and be right back talking SEC basketball with Chris Lee of the Southeastern 14 and Coach John Brady right after this.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House Equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sideline.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am R.A. Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
All right, Rob Browne back here with Coach John Brady joining us right now, and Chris Lee, Southeastern 14, Vandy Rivals up in Nashville. And it was SEC Basketball Media Days. But let me show you something real quick. Got these pants yesterday. These are the new long pants that Duckhead makes, camouflage. Now, they're in this pattern, but they're really comfortable. Went out to Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee, one of our sponsors. They got more cool stuff in there than, you can't even imagine. Great stuff that you can wear hunting, outdoors, over 7,000 pairs of boots. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But, man, it's getting cold in the morning, Coach Brady. Chris and I have been talking some football. He was at SEC Media Day down in Mountain Brook. But hard to believe, man, that people last year in the spring thought, wow, with San Diego State and Florida Atlantic, that's not good for basketball. I think it was the best thing to happen for basketball in terms of national interest. But let's talk some basketball and what you learned down there. And first off, glad to see you again. Thanks for taking time to share with us, because you're one of our most popular guests we ever have.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad somebody remembers who I am from time to time. But Media Day was good. I mean, it was that's why I like to go, particularly now since I've traveled to LSU and do their color for their radio broadcast. In today's world, I don't know who's coming and going. There's so many new players, and it's hard to predict kind of who's good and who isn't. But I think that the thread that I felt through the better teams in the league next year, they have good returning guards, and particularly A&M, Tennessee. They got good guards coming back. And I think that's why these teams are picked where they are. And for a change, the media kind of got this right, in my opinion. I think that the first team all league, the second team is pretty much on point. And I also think that the list of the players, the teams of where they're predicted to finish, I think are good. Is pretty good. I think the league, it appears to me on the front end to be top heavy. I think the top 6 teams or so are going to be really good. And then I think there's 2 or 3, the Mississippi State, the Florida, Missouri, possibly. And unless Ole Miss gets 2 guys off the waiver portal, I think those are the next 4 or 5 teams, including LSU. They're going to fight it out for the last 4 or 5 spots.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. I would say the 6 teams would, and John, you tell me if I'm wrong, Arkansas, A&M, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky would be your 6.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's one out there waiting in the weeds, and I think it's Florida. I think the more I look at that team and what those kids have done other places, that's a team that could jump up there, and maybe with what Dennis Gates has done at Missouri, they might belong in that conversation too. But those are 2 more that and Mississippi State, if the Toulouse Smith thing, if he comes back healthy at some point, they've got enough experience and talent to make a late run. But yeah, I pretty much agree with that.
I think you're right. Those are my next 3 teams. And to listen to Golden yesterday or Wednesday, whenever it was, I lose track of days, talk about his team. He's excited about it, feels good about it. The key to them is, as you know, they have the number 1 ranked transfer portal squad coming in, and it depends on how those guys really work out. And sometimes with the portal, it's very good, and sometimes it's not as good as you maybe anticipated. So we'll see how that works out with Florida. And I agree with you. If those players, because he's got guards back, Kugel and Richard, and those guys are good players. If those portal guys work out for Florida, I agree they could bust in that top 5.
Yeah, and you look at the interest in basketball. I mean, I thought the SEC Network did a good job of bringing a player, coaches, and the people out there. Again, this is just me. I'd love to see you on that set. I think you're so good at explaining it and putting it in the vernacular. You really get it. I know you love working with LSU, but I think you and Damian Fishback and those guys up there would be a lot of fun because you're covering a lot of games. I like the shooter, Pat Bradley. I mean, he lives in Little Rock now, from Everett, Mass. And I love hearing him talk.
I always kid shooter. When I was at LSU, he put 32 on me one night, 22 the second half. We couldn't guard him. So he's always been a thorn in my side. And I love to compliment him on that every time I see him. Yeah,
and that's why we love having you on, because as a coach, you've worked some people, harder than they've ever been worked in their lives, and you see them, and then you compete against them. And I think that's what I like, Chris, is that when Coach is on here, John Hartwell will be on, our friend who's the AD at ULM. John Brady recruited John Hartwell when he was in high school. They can remember that. And I had Jackie Sherrill on the show this week, and Ben Troop was on from Florida, and he goes, Ben, boy, I cussed you a lot, because he played against him and remembered it. And they were, after this, he goes, can I get his phone number? I want to call him and talk to him. I think that's cool. Coaches, we as fans sometimes fail to appreciate how close these guys are. They're competitors, but there's a ton of respect. And the thing, no matter what happens in a game, my favorite part after a football or basketball game is when the players shake hands and get together, kneel for a prayer. And then there's just seeing, like Chris, last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, the coolest photos was after an LSU-Alabama game. John Brady had his picture with Wimp Sanderson and Dale Browne. I mean, that's what I love about it, Chris.
Yeah, there is a fraternity and a brotherhood that I'm sure John can speak to more than I can, but I agree with you. That part is neat.
Well, the older you get, the more you appreciate that. I think sometimes when you're in it, you don't feel that kinship as much, but once you get out of it and reflect back, it gets a lot more, close, when you get through doing it. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, like when we went through the virus year in basketball, I mean, I remember I was so excited because Auburn had beaten Tennessee in Knoxville 84-64, and went to lunch with my dad in the Saturday round table, and boom, they're in the SEC tournament and it's over. It's like they turned off the light switch and we didn't have an NCAA tournament. That was hard. And I think when we came back into the fall of 20 with football and basketball like we did, we realized how much we really do care for each other. We want to beat each other, but it's also, there's a lot more respect than people want to give credit for. Coach Brady, tell us, in your opinion, about college basketball. You've watched this tournament grow from 16 or 32 to 48 to now 64, and everybody's worried, well, we're going to go from 4 to 12 in football. All I've ever seen with college basketball, it's so good that my son that is living in Charlotte said, Dad, every weekend now is like March Madness in college football. It's going to be a lot of fun. But talk about that growth, because I think it's just continuing to make basketball more popular.
Well, when I was at LSU, Nick Saban told me one time, he said, John, never forget this. They say it's not about the money, but it's always about the money. and that has something to do with the expansion of the playoffs, I think, is how many dollars they can make. But I think football is a little different than basketball in terms of the limited numbers that are in the playoff. And I think the expansion will be good, because at LSU 3 weeks ago, they were gloom and doom, Ole Miss, season's over, all this sort of thing. And now they've won a couple and they're back thinking they may have a chance if they win out. But Saban was also right on this. He said it when they created this playoff, that the bowl games are going to become insignificant, that if you're not in the playoffs, down the stretch in college football season, most fans are going to think the season's over. And that's kind of the way it's went. Basketball is a little bit different, a little bit more exciting. There's a lot more teams that have an opportunity with the transfer portal and all of these things that are happening, NIL, and how many thousand players are going to different schools. You have a Florida Atlantic, and you have some of those type schools that if they keep their team together, and experienced fifth-year players and seniors that have been in the program are playing against transfers and young players, they have a chance to advance. And I think you're going to see maybe more of that. You know, we went to the Final Four in 06. Larinaga took a George Mason team that had started like 4 seniors and a couple of fifth-year guys and went to the Final Four. And I think you're going to see some of that this year, maybe more of it because of the state of the game and where it is right now.
Yeah, and looking around last year again, San Diego State, who would have taken that bet if you went to the window in Las Vegas before the season that they're going to the Final Four, or Florida Atlantic? And, you know, Chris, along the line of what he's saying, you go from 4 to 12 in football. It is about money. I mean, the terms of endearment follow the money trail. But in college basketball, when your team is good, you pay attention to the regular season because it says everything about how you're going to play in the postseason. Made me more of a Bruce Pearl being at Auburn. I don't miss a game. I mean, my 95-year-old dad watches every single Auburn game. Interesting.
Yeah, and to a tangent off your point here, one thing as I'm doing is I'm getting home and I'm kind of unwinding what I've seen at media days and themes, and I'm going, man, how many incredible coaches did I see at the podium today? I mean, let's say Kansas Open today, right? I'm guessing Eric Musselman and Nate Oates are going to be on Kansas's short list. Rick Barnes, in my mind, probably deserves to be a Hall of Famer one day. John Calipari is going to be there. You've got Todd Golden at Florida, who's an up-and-coming coach. You've got Buzz Williams, who's probably a top 25 coach in America. You got Dennis Gates, who's one of the rising stars in our profession. You got maybe a top, well, Chris Beard would definitely be a top 25 coach in the country now at Ole Miss, if not top 10. Everywhere you look, everybody's got a coach that's either been there and done that or giving you some things to pay attention to. And I think that when you've got great coaches, the product's going to follow. And I think that's what's making this so interesting.
You know, I agree with that. I've always kept it real simple, that good coaching and good players make for really good teams. And you know, the SEC is going to recruit good players, and the coaches that are in place at these schools are really good. And, you know, I go back to Ole Miss. If Chris Beard can get 2 of these guys off the waiver, if they approve them as double-time, 2-time transfers or whatever that term is, you know, he could be really good and surprise a lot of people simply because of the way they defend and how they force the ball to one side, jam it on the baseline and double team it. A little bit different than the way some guys play it, the aggressiveness of which they play it with. You know, I think he could be pretty good. And, you know, all those older guys that are in the league, I coached against those guys. And I've always been a lot of respect for Bruce and Rick and Calipari and all these kind of guys that have been around the block. And you throw Mike White in there, you know, he's no dummy either. I mean, he can coach a team too. So that makes it really good. And anybody can beat anybody. But again, I'm going to go back to what I said in the first. I think this year, as opposed to possibly last year, outside of maybe 2 teams, that I think it is a little bit top heavy. And I certainly agree that Auburn, Mississippi State, and Florida have a chance to punch that button and get in the top 6. But we'll just see how it unfolds. And I think I'm going to say this too. This is a good point. In the South Carolina head coach, which I don't know him very well. The first question they asked him yesterday or Wednesday, whenever it was what do you feel about being picked last in the SEC? The first question off the top. And I was impressed because he was prepared to answer that question. He knew it was going to come at some point. And he said, well, let me give you a stat. He said, how many teams last year finished where they were preseason picked? None of them. Last year in the SEC, the preseason 1 through 14 or whatever it is, none of them finished where they were preseason picked. And he made that point. And, which I think was pretty good. You know, you start looking at it, and that's why it makes it so exciting, because you never know what team comes together, the intangibles they develop along the way, and how good they can possibly be. And I've always thought and believed that to have a special season or a significant season, you have to win close games. You have to win your majority of close games. And the teams that are able to win most of the close games that they participate in or play in usually have special seasons or significant seasons.
Yeah. Interesting question. Casey Goodjohn out in, let's see, I know he's out in Claiborne County, Texas. What are your thoughts on Nick Cody out of Texas being recruited heavily? I think he's a pretty big time recruit. If either one of y'all know much about him, he just sent me some information on him. And it's almost that time. Commitment announcement November 2nd at 4 p.m. Central. The wait is almost over. Who you with? Do y'all know anybody want to make a prediction on where he's going to end up?
No idea.
You know, if I have enough trouble keeping up with the rosters of the teams that are presently in the SEC, much less reaching out on recruits that are in the South or even all over the country. I'm not up to date on that type of thing. I wait till they get in the league, and then I try to figure it out.
Yeah, I like what you said one time last year, Coach, about people saying, "Oh, this guy's a lottery pick," or "This team has 2 or 3 lottery picks," and you came back and you said, I had a few Stromile Swift and some guys like that were lottery picks. He goes, they didn't go out and put up a goose egg or 3 points and 1 rebound. They were 20-6, 20-9. I like that. There's no playing around with you. Native of Macomb, Mississippi.
And back in the day, or maybe still today, I don't know who evaluates those players and puts stars by their name. Have they ever, coached a team or really watched a player? Or how do they get that sort of reputation to classify who's what? I've had some pretty good players that were 2 stars or 3 stars, and some that were 4 or 5 stars and been bust. So you never know. It's the intangibles in the young man, the heart he has, the toughness, the competitive nature that drives him. All of those things are going to carry him to be, the talent that he has and bring out the potential in him if he has those things. But, some of these teams, some of these guys in the SEC last year were 5-star recruits, and they'd get 5, 8, 10, 9 points. And I don't get that. But I am excited about this coming season and see how it unfolds.
Yeah. And looking at Chris Beard, I mean, I know you've talked about him some, Chris. He's a guy that's been a head coach 8 or 9 years. And last year, Yancy Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, he'll be on in the next hour with us, brought it up. He said, he goes, look, keep an eye on Chris Beard. He's going to be Ole Miss's next basketball coach. And he was right. Yancy also said last year, Quinshon Judkins would be the player when Nick Saban and whoever the Auburn coach is at the time writes the player they wish they would have recruited, they didn't offer. It's him out of Park Crossing, 35 minutes from Auburn's campus. He said they never called. And he goes and has 1,600 yards rushing as a freshman at Ole Miss. Chris Beard strikes me as the kind of guy that you would love to play for, that you'd want to please, to work hard. The great coaches, like great teachers, great friends that you have, they push you to want to be absolutely better than you. They get you out of your comfort zone. What do you know about Chris Beard? Because I think playing for you would have been a lot of fun, Coach, because you're driven and, but I'm saying as an athlete, they've got to have somebody that's not going to let them feel sorry for themselves if things aren't working out initially. There's a long way ahead.
Well, I got to know Chris when he was at Little Rock, and then when he went to Texas Tech, I went out and spent a weekend and watched him play and watched him practice. Saw him at the SEC Media Days. He's really good friends with myself, particularly Tim Floyd, who's a real good friend of mine, and we're all similar to kind of how we play the game a little bit. But Chris has been smart enough to. He is challenging, but he's also on the other side. The players know he's really concerned as well about them, and I think that's a fine line in today's game when you can coach hard, but you also have to let them know where you stand with them. And I think individual meetings in this day and age is really important because I think most players are kind of maybe insecure in who they are, where they are because of the media and all the criticism or adulation they get. And I think coaches today have to meet with players individually on a regular basis to bring them along on where they really stand and let them have a voice and respond. Chris is really good. You're exactly right. Players love playing for Chris Beard, and I think you're going to see that in the way the Ole Miss team responds to him this year, regardless of their talent level, which I think could be pretty good, better than most people may think. But players really enjoy playing for him, and he does a wonderful job.
Yeah. Chris Lee, you saw that press conference when Chris Beard was introduced at the pavilion. I mean, there were thousands of people there for that press conference, and he hit the ground running. I just, the SEC, you keep bringing sand to the beach. It makes the league very competitive.
Yeah, and look, there's the other part, the ugly stuff that happened that forced Chris Beard out of Texas. But as I've heard people say, Ole Miss is never going to get a coach like that without something like that. I'm not going to get into the weeds on all that stuff. Obviously, the optics of it were awful. But look, here's the thing about Chris Beard. I remember the first time I found out about Chris Beard was I'm looking through Ken Palm in 2016 and just thinking, all right, I wonder who the next up and coming coach is. And I'm looking up and there's Little Rock in the top 50 of Ken Palm. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We used to see him in the 300s. What's this about? And who's their coach? And it's Chris Beard. You look him up. He's had a record where he's been in basketball a long time, but he's never really been the guy. He goes to Texas Tech. He's taken them to places they never dreamed of. And so I think Ole Miss, in terms of, put the other stuff aside, if you're looking for a guy that can take a program to a place it's never been, you just hired a guy that's done it twice.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
Good point. Exactly. And Lane Kiffin he wasn't crystal clear on his reputation either. So to your point, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been to a lot of different venues in the SEC for basketball. The pavilion comes right on top of you. The Auburn Neville Arena. They've got Mr. Neville, generous gift there a couple of years ago out of Eufaula. Neville Arena, nobody's more than 46 feet away from the court. I think the design of these new arenas, Coach, is they're all they're smaller, but they're on top of you, and it's hard. You go everywhere in the SEC. Got another school I got to ask you about. Got a lot of questions coming in. I can't type them in fast enough. Arkansas. Man, last year, that's a school that we got 3 lottery picks, but let's talk about what you think they're doing. Their fan base is as passionate as there is in the world.
I think it's maybe the toughest place to play in the league. And the other thing that's really complimentary of their fan base is it's not like they all live in Fayetteville. Some of those cats drive 3-4 hours for every game and then turn around and drive back home or either spend the night. And sometimes the weather is not really the best to get there. So that's a dedicated fan base. And, Musselman, what's he been to Sweet 16s the last 3 years? I mean, you can't get much better than that besides going to a Final Four and possibly winning it. But he's got a good combination of players that are coming back, plus a good combination of 6 freshmen coming in. 95 wins since he's been there. 60 home wins is most in the league. I mean, that the fan base has a lot to do with that place creating an atmosphere that's really tough to play in. And he's not only made it as good as it's been, but he's probably made it as good as when Nolan was in his heyday or even better. So you got to compliment the job he's done and the players that he's getting to Arkansas to make them every year he's been there top 2 or 3 or 4 in the league.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, Lane Kiffin calls himself the Portal King. I think if you had a Portal King for basketball, it's probably either him or Nate Oates. I think the kids that he brought in, and excuse my dog, he's getting riled up again about something. I saw Khalif Battle play at Temple last year. He put about 35 on Vandy, and just that game went into overtime, and it felt like they couldn't stop him. They get Chandler Lawson as a supporting piece. They get the Harris kid from Southern Miss who'll be depth. They got Jalen Graham sitting there who played, 300 minutes a year ago, was second team all Pac-10 at Arizona State. He's back. They landed Brazil 2 years ago from Missouri. They never really got to unpack that before he got hurt. And then they bring in a couple of big freshmen. But, yeah, I mean, and the Mitchell, Mekhi Mitchell's back after transferring from Rhode Island. He has really put this together. And then probably the biggest piece is the kid from Houston, Mark, who is one of the better defenders in college basketball and will probably start for them. Yeah, he knows better how to flip a roster and adjust to the climate than anybody.
Coach, before you go, and I got to ask you, LSU, that is a program, I think you pointed out, it when they get committed to anything at LSU, it's always really good. You look at football, basketball, baseball. I mean, another super passionate fan base. You are a color analyst on the LSU Basketball Network. Let's talk about your team that you've got coming back. They've been through hell and back, but as a coach, you said you like to listen. And if they ever want to ask you questions, you're available. But, you know that team better than anybody.
Well, he brought in 9 or 10 new players a year ago. Now they have 7 or 8 new players this year. I think even in today's world, I think you have to have some kind of stability. I think the better teams, you look at Kentucky or particularly Tennessee or particularly A&M, they got players coming back with young players and with the portal. I think it's a combination to get some stability. LSU hadn't got to that point yet. Yeah. I think this team this year is better. I think they're going to be a lot more inclined to what Coach McMahon wants them to do in terms of being more coachable. They want to be there. Now, whether it translates into a move up in the league remains to be seen. I've watched them practice 4 or 5 times, and I said before SEC meetings, I don't see an all-league player, first or second team, on the team yet. And in what the media picked, it bared that out. And so, but sometimes collectively you can be better than some individual that people have accolades for. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think the team's going to be better. Can they win some close games in the league or win a game on the road? It's going to be interesting to follow this team and see that the preseason schedule is more challenging than it was a year ago. Yeah. So we'll just see how it plays out. But you're right. At LSU, you got Kim Mulkey. Baseball wins it. Kim Mulkey wins it. You've got Brian Kelly in football. The gymnastics sells it out. I mean, he's sitting there in the middle of everybody who's real successful. But Matt's got to do it his way, do it the way he wants to do it. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to be fine. I think he'll be better this year. I think the third year they'll be even better. And if he can get through that, I think he's going to be okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's a challenge. It's not easy anywhere. And it's hard to believe this is the 10th year for Bruce Pearl. It's the first year. I think Chris Beard has captured my attention more than any new coach coming in, and along the lines of what both of y'all said. I love it. Let's do this again next week, get you on talking basketball. I love it. It's a sport in the South. When these schools get committed, and Mike Slive fired the shot over the bow, about 10 years ago when he said, we're going to have a better product with this SEC network. And I think everybody got the memo.
Well, I appreciate being on and have me back anytime. I'm right there.
Hey, and the SEC set, as you can see, my new set in the background, at Louisiana, LSU doesn't have to share it with anybody. How do they follow you on Twitter, Coach?
I have no idea. I mean, you have to do that for me. I have a Twitter, but I have no idea what it is.
I know. You put out good stuff. I'll get your address and put it up there. Have a great weekend, Coach.
All right. Later.
See you. All right. I love it. I absolutely love it. Hey, Chris, that you know your basketball. Bo Carter is on with us now. Chris, stay on as long as you want to. We're going to have Yancy Porter in just a second from Rebel Yell Hotline. But like I said, I like to call these round tables. It's like the band, Austin City Limits. Let's bring, Bo Carter. Bo Carter's going to come up here on the band. Bo, this is Chris Lee. He's Vandy Rivals, Southeastern 14 in Nashville. Bo was a Vanderbilt graduate former SID at Mississippi State, Southwest Conference office, the Big 12 office, now a writer for the National Football Foundation and Baseball Writers of America, working on his second baseball book about the Philadelphia Phillies. And we also have the other part of the Texas duo on Fridays, Ken Capps. He's got to take care of his mom today. Great son that he is. Hook 'em horns. Hey, Bo, do you see the new set in the background?
Yes, looks good. Looks good.
Great. Barnwood Brenda made that down in Batesville. Say that 5 times real fast. But she hand carves these things. And Chris, she's getting the information right now. I've got you the quote, and she's checking on the wood right now. But I'll get you in touch with her to make one of these. But they're really Texas is. Look at there. It doesn't matter what we do. Texas just it's their colors. They just stand out. But if everybody can hold, we're going to take a quick commercial break and be right back. And we got a lot to talk about in hour number 2. Chris, I like what should take that dog coyote hunting with you now. My dog is starting to growl. Hey,
yeah,
Casey,
I think I think the dog needs to be out in the backyard running around, and I hate to. I've got a sick daughter I need to go look after.
Oh yeah,
gotcha. But I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun.
Hey, look, yeah, absolutely, and let people know how they can follow you because you put out a lot of great work, and you referenced an interview segment that people need to watch. So remind people of that before we take the break. And as always, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and our viewers.
Yeah, you can follow me at Chris Lee 70 on Twitter. Our Twitter account is Southeastern 14, although I think it might be 14 Southeastern. I'd have to look that one up. Soon
X, whatever you call it.
Right, X, yeah. And but most of our stuff is on YouTube. Just search Southeastern 14. We got over 12,000 followers. We really haven't been around that long, and got some things maybe in the works for some new platforms. Not going to let that out of the bag till we get that finalized. But yeah, right now, most of our stuff is on YouTube. Just search Southeastern 14 and you'll find us.
Well, I've got a lot of people have complimented me and said, bring him on anytime he can be on because you do a ton of work, a lot of research, and you're part of the TGJ, True Grit Journalism, print, video, radio, podcast, whatever. So we certainly appreciate everything you do. Hope your daughter gets better, okay?
Yeah, thank you. God bless you guys. Thanks for having me on.
God bless you as well. We'll be right back for hour number 2, Friday Sidelines.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am R.A. Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
Browne back here with you. We got Bo Carter, Yancy Porter should be joining us here momentarily. Rebel Yell Hotline. And Bo, that was Coach John Brady was on with us. We're talking about SEC basketball media days, and he is a trip. I mean, he is a lot of fun. And that's the thing that's so cool about having you on here. And Chris was at SEC Media Day. I keep thinking that's like the Pac-12 has for football. I'm looking for the day we have media days for basketball. And now they had it at a great place, the Bohemian Hotel in Mountain Brook, one of the most beautiful places you'll find anywhere, the Tiny Kingdom. It is gorgeous down there. But, you go to those media days events, and there's a lot happening. And it can be, if you're not careful, it can, be overwhelming because you're trying to say, okay, I want to interview this coach and that player and whoever that's there. You structured these kind of things before, SEC, SID, Southwest Conference, Big 12 and all. How do you go about putting that schedule together? And just for the average fan out there, for, our perpetual fan, Floyd R. Turbo American in Olathe, Kansas, explain to him how you put together a media day or 4 media days in a row like they do in football.
Good question, Rob. Usually the one thing that for all the years I worked in conference offices, you try to get the most interesting person or the best. We used to always try to get Spike Dykes up there, our old friend.
Yeah.
The late Spike Dykes, Sonny Dykes' dad up there early in the thing. You put, and no offense to Dr. Tom Osborne, who's still kicking at 86 years old. He would be at the end because he was sort of the scholarly professorial type that was kind of quiet and didn't, typical coach speak. But you try to get a good blend of really, great speakers early, and then sort of tail it down a little bit toward the middle, and then at the end put the guys that were the and coach speak isn't the right word, but the guys that weren't going to reveal much about. They're going to say, "Well, we got a good line, good backfield, and or great. We got some pretty good guards playing for us this year."
Yep.
So, one of the best ones. You'll love this story, Rob. Hugh Durham and Don DeVoe, two of the funniest people. Coach Durham passed away, but Don DeVoe is still kicking in Maryland. But Georgia was playing Tennessee was playing a weak schedule that year, and Hugh Durham got up and said, "Yeah, Don DeVoe's playing Eckerd Drugstore." They're playing Eckerd College out of St. Peter. They're playing Eckerd Drugstore and Walmart and every dog.
Oh my God!
They had a few words after the news conference was over, but it was all in. There were some really characters. Bob Boyd at Mississippi State, who was always, who John Brady and I worked with, for 4 years. Coach Brady's he put up with a lot of nonsense from Bob Boyd. They'd stop practicing the metal boys. "I don't feel like practicing today. Let's get out of here. Let's go to the bar or whatever." Really good story. John Brady will be included in the Mississippi State book. It'll be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, and how many pages into Tales of Mississippi State Athletics? Oops on the square in Canton, Mississippi.
We got back to it, Rob. I think we're up to about 130. We've got to talk the athletic department into publishing it for us, and part of the part of the proceeds going to the Bulldog Club, so that'll be help some scholarship. We'll do we're not quite into the NIL money.
Yeah, well, I like it. Percy in Grenada, Mississippi. Bo Carter's a first-class Southern gentleman. Probably a Mississippi State fan who remembers you. Mm-hmm. Again, I remember. I think you were a contributing writer to Ben Cook's SEC Sports Journal. Did you put that story together in 1979 or 80 that came out, front cover, Mississippi State's magic man, Marty McDowell from Mobile, Alabama?
I think we might have, Marty just passed away this year too. Is really
you told us, man.
He coached at Murphy High, where he played in Mobile for about 35 years. One of the all-time, and boy, I tell you, he could really, they split the wishbone up his junior and senior years, and they called it the wing bone kind of. But he played at a slot and really to get the ball to him. I think he ran about 20 times for 200 yards or something. He was really tremendous. He might have been one of the best all-around football athletes Mississippi State ever had.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. He's one of the best receivers, best athletes, period. Lot of players down on the Gulf Coast, man. Mississippi State. There was a period where they signed 37 players over a few years from Moss Point, Mississippi.
Moss Point, right.
Moss Point. They had a pipeline. That's an understatement. Jackie Sherrill was on with us yesterday, Wednesday. That was a lot of fun. He's a truth broker, man. And Ben Troop was on, and I didn't realize, right when I said, "Oh, you know what?" He goes, "Ben, I cussed you a lot. We played against you." He remembered everything about those games and everything. And I got, there's already a question coming in. And I'm going to tell you, your book about Mississippi State athletics, it's really, really just, I've read a lot of it. Send me another updated version.
We will.
But I'm going to say that here it is. When is the Mississippi State book going to be published? We don't know, but waiting. Hey, look, we know one thing. The statute of limitations has long expired.
That's right. Okay. So we could tell the story about the 1962 guy, that grad student that enrolled in Florida and one of Mississippi State's grad assistants, and they had to tear all the pages out of the Mississippi State Florida program because they knew they would recognize him he played pool with the Florida players, and Florida still beat him, I think, 19-9 in the game. So
oh my God,
kind of like Michigan these days, Rob, with their stealing signals off the sidelines.
Yep, isn't that kind of funny? So explain that again here. That there was a player. I got to hear this right.
It was a little desperate. Mississippi State they had some pretty good teams, of late 50s under Wade Walker, Billy Stacy, and Tom Good, some of those guys. But in the early 60s, they were starting to fade a little bit. And Wade Walker was it might have been when Paul Davis first took over. But we were a friend from Auburn who coached the defensive coordinator at Auburn for several years. But and Dave Cody, remember Dave Cody's Skywriter tour there.
Statute of limitations again.
I know, and I don't know whose idea. It might not have been Coach Walker's or Coach Walker or Paul Davis's idea, but they sent a 22-year-old graduate coach from Mississippi State, grad assistant, down to Florida, enrolled him in school, and he took classes, hung around the football team, went to all the practices, made sure to watch everything, and then the week before the Florida game, he came back up and did the whole scouting report for Mississippi State. And they suddenly realized the week of the game that that the Florida people would recognize him from the game programs. They went back and tore the page out with the grad assistants pictures out of all 5,000 programs. So
that is a great story. That's your book could well become a 30 for 30.
We hope so.
SEC Storied presents Tales of Mississippi State Athletics. Bo Carter.
Yeah, Rob, you've seen the 30 for 30 about Will Clark and Raphael Palmer.
Yes.
The producer never, and Joe Deere was on there, and they unfortunately didn't ask him. He was there when it happened about the Thunder and Lightning. Mississippi State was playing South Carolina. Quick story, in the NCAA regionals that year, Palmero came up. There was a thunderstorm going off in the outfield about 10 miles before the NCAA 9-mile lightning and thunder meter there or whatever. They still played through it. And Palmero came up, and you could see a bolt of lightning off the distance. Next pitch, he hit a home run. And then Clark followed him in the batting order, and you hear the rumble of thunder in the background. He had a home run right after the next pitch. And Joe Deere looked over and said, "Thunder and lightning," and everybody started, "Oh, yeah, that's a great name for those two guys." So
that's
it's sort of the way they look.
It's
sort of the way they played too. So it was really good. They said everything on the 30 for 30. We don't know how it got it, but all they had to do was ask somebody. So
wow.
We'll reveal that in the book. So
I mean, okay. This is, I tell you one thing, a book. I like this, these stories, I mean, they're so cool, and there's 130 pages into it. I like, Jethro Tull in Buckatuna, Mississippi. Preach on, Bo. I mean, I think we must have talked about the show getting gas, because Buckatuna is on Highway 45,
yes.
What I call the land that time forgot, on the way from Memphis to Orange Beach. And
Yes.
I love it down there. South of Macon,
Suba,
Scuba, Last Chance U. you got
Suba right outside of Meridian, another great Indian.
And we used to go to Weinman's restaurant. I think it was Weinman's.
Yep,
It had the big barrels that you would sit on at the bar. And coming back as a kid, escaping Hurricane Camille, we stopped off there. Never forget the guy at the Esso station. The station, we were in the station wagon, and my mother said, "Bob, you better have him look at the car." And he unscrewed the cap, and it went, he just blew steam, that took the guy's head off. We had to spend the night in Meridian. Been there many, many times. Lauderdale County, Mississippi.
Oh yeah. You remember Shorty McWilliams, who played for Mississippi State. Gloria, his wife, was one of the Weinman family, and then Sheila Ward. Remember our old friend that was in all the Alabama cheerleader, who was in the several movies. What was the Emerald Point Naval Air Station? Her family, she and her husband bought into Weidman, so they kept it open when it was having some financial difficulties. So they've still got the good peanut butter and crackers at every
That's
table.
what it was. Weinman's. And I'm going to tell you, I met Celia Ward's brother. Celia Ward's brother at the Hopkins Plantation down in Clarksdale, Mississippi. We were duck hunting over in Lambert where I hunt in the Delta. And I met her brother, and I'm sitting there talking to him. He says he's from Meridian. And I'm like, going, there's no way. He looks just like her. And we were talking, and he said that kind of came up. He very humble, but cool guy. And, there is something in the water in Mississippi that produces all these good looking women. There absolutely is. And in Arkansas and Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia and Louisiana. I mean, there's something in the water. It's called God's grace. I mean,
magic potion. And Celia's two brothers were both Mississippi, Heath, and the other one I can't remember the other, Heath and Judd or something, but they were both Mississippi State grad. She went to Alabama to be a cheerleader, be in the limelight there.
Yeah, this one was a duck. I know one thing. He was a duck hunter.
Yep.
And he was there at the Hopkins Plantation there. They've got 32 shotgun shacks, metal, corrugated metal, like the Sugar Shack, the Love Shack, the Sunflower Shack. And you can stay there and spend the weekend, whatever. And you talk about going back in time. You can get TV if you want it. I didn't want it. And when it rains and you're looking out over the bean and the cotton fields, it's gorgeous. And they've got live music, great food. And we stayed in the Elvis Lodge. This thing was ginormous. It was like $200 for the night. You could have put 15 people in there. I got to, okay. Yancy Porter's going to be on with us in here in a second. Okay. Tap the link there, Yancy. But I think back about how many times, here we go. Think back about how many times when you are down there in the Delta, places like, in Clarksdale, where that is, you talk about, if you want to go someplace and just get away from it all, golly, man, you can hear yourself think. It's like Audrey's got me doing this intermittent fasting. So after we eat dinner at night, we can't eat till 12 noon the next day. Anyone that knows me knows I get hangry. I get terrible. I am but I'm getting used to it. And you can lose some weight doing it, but you can think when you're doing intermittent fasting. I don't know, your head gets clear.
That's
Bo, I heard one of the funniest things. Friend of mine who's out in Dallas, the morning ticket, those little parodies those guys do, like with Bochy, the manager of the, well, we're gonna see that. I don't know. I think the Rangers, we're just gonna go up there and see how we do. And then we're talking with October always is the start of a very special time of the year, the Texas State Fair. And on with this, of course, is our good friend Big Tex. Big Tex, how are you out there at the State Fair? He's like, well, hello, everyone. Texas State Fair. It's big crowds everywhere. And Big Tex, I know you're excited. Well, yes, the Texas State Fair. And that's that voice. It sounds like it's on a PA system.
It is.
And he goes, what are some of the new food items you have out there? And he goes, well, we've got the new one this year. It's the deep fried butter. Talks about it. He goes, eat a turkey leg and that grease will go through you like steel shot through a goose.
That's right.
And Big Tex, but most people's fairs are 10 days. The Texas State Fair is 3 weeks.
3 weeks it is. And Rob, you missed the fun. About 10 years ago, Big Tex's head caught on fire and the statue burned down. One of the local funeral homes had a funeral for Big Tex. Had guys decked out in cowboy hats and kids. One lady said she was his ex-wife and divorced him because he spent too much time at the fair. I'll send you the link. It's the funniest funeral service I've ever seen in my life.
Well, you go in there, and I'm trying to see if we can get Big Tex is a legend. He's bigger. He's actually, bigger than life. That's the funny thing about him. And I'm going to say here, I'm looking for, with Big Tex. Yeah. And I hope you can hear this. This is about, I mean, some of these guys, whoever these two cats are that do these things, they're brilliant. I'm going to see if you, let me know if you can. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. You ready? See if we can hear this. This is some of the best stuff ever. Now tell me if you can hear it.
Week of the fair.
Yep.
We bring on live from the state fair, the main grounds, Big Tex joining us via satellite.
You can hear it okay?
Yes.
Howdy, folks, and welcome to the State Fair of Texas.
With the echo.
Hey. Actually, I've got a new call for people to come to the State Fair. Yeah, here we go.
Picking up on that.
So Big Texas tribute to Rain Dakota Prescott.
Yeah.
The overpaid starting backup quarterback for the Dallas football Cowboys.
Come on, don't say that just a few days before the 49er game.
We'd like to welcome Cowboy fans to the State Fair of Texas.
It's
I mean, Texas. Again, Bo, you're going to be at media days next year when we come to Dallas, aren't you?
You got it. Oh, of course, we'll be there. We'll have to go get some barbecue with you, Rob, while you're here.
We're gonna have fun. And I know Ken's taking care of his mom this morning. But you know, big. here's Dave Cody. Big Tex burned up in 2012. They had to replace it.
They did. They had to take it. It took about a year to rebuild the thing, but they got it ready for the state fair. And it was the guy that does the imitation Big is actually from the Jackson area. A guy named Gordon Keith. He's a stand-up comic and has been on the show for about. They've been on for 29 years. Next year will be the 30th anniversary, Rob. One of
those two guys that do that stuff on the radio in Dallas.
And George Dunham and Craig Miller are two good friends. They started KRLD, the Cowboys flagship station, about when they were in college. And Gordon Keith's was a Baptist minister that got transferred from Jackson or Clinton to Dallas, and the rest is he's at one time he had had sort of a Saturday Night Live television show out here. So those guys, they do great imitations of Jerry Jones and Michael Irvin. Remember the old Cowboys receiver?
Yeah. Oh my God! I have
KTCK.com. You'll get a big laugh out of their sketches there.
Dave Cody just sent me a picture via text of burned out Big Tex in 2012. It's just this burned corpse, this edifice. How tall is Big Tex?
I think about 60 or 70. It's about as tall as the Sixers. And it was funny. The backstory on it was there's a little town in East Texas called Kerens, Kerens. And that was their Santa Claus. They built the thing, I guess, from the ground up in the late 40s, early 50s. And somebody from the state fair saw it and said, gosh, this would be great. We could put some cowboy boots on him and put a bandana around him. And so the Santa Claus became Big Tex in the early 50s.
Wow.
Amazing deal.
Let's hear a little bit more Big Tex.
Speaking of food, State Fair is the only place where you can eat 12,000 calories in less than 23 seconds with our new menu item, deep fried butter.
Wow, that sounds rich. Yeah, you can walk that off, though.
Where we take a stick of butter, deep fry it, then butter it, and deep fry it again in Oreo-flavored pure animal grease.
Wow.
Then sprinkle it with chili powder and drench it in queso. Douse it with whipped cream and jalapenos. Serve it with a wedding cake and an auxiliary stick of butter. Deep fried butter. Now that's what I call pizza.
Rob, they had deep fried whiskey out there. What they do, they get a big Yancy will love this. They have a big, you take a thing of whiskey, pour it inside a piece of bread and then fry it or whatever. And you get a nice jolt after you bite into the deep fried, it's sort of like a funnel cake type thing. So, but you can get hammered at the state fair, and they serve beer at 8 o'clock in the morning before the OU Texas game. So,
yeah, Yancy, we're talking about big Tex at the Texas State Fair, and they were talking about their new menu item, deep fried butter. Yep, we take it, we deep fry it, and then we fry it again in Oreo fat and animal grease. Yep. 12,000 calories in 23 seconds. The guy goes, well, you can certainly walk that off. He goes, oh, you take it again. But Yancy, how are you? It's a Friday morning. I've been sniffing glue out in the parking lot before I came on here.
Sounds like it.
No, we're having fun talking college football, basketball, Texas State Fair. Bo Carter, Ken Capps can't be on this morning. He had to take care of his mom, but they were like going, when's Yancy going to be back on? I said, I'm going to start putting Yancy on with the Texas guys. And here's something interesting. The Brislin brothers who played at Mississippi State were cousins. Think one served time. Mickey and Pat were parents and done. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Sound like the Tiller brothers in Memphis. We lost Yancy there. Yancy, you still with us?
I'm right here.
Okay.
Good,
yeah.
Good
But look, college football, man, it's week 8. Ole Miss going on the road, playing at Auburn. They're going to try to do something they hadn't done since the early 50s, 51, 52, beat Auburn back-to-back. Looking at it objectively, taking off my Auburn, cap and gown, I don't see how Auburn can keep up in a track meet. Ole Miss scores 21 points. It could be too much to overcome. Auburn's offense statistically is last place in the SEC. There's not a number 15 spot to give them.
Yeah, the key to the game for Auburn is just being able to throw the rock. That's Ole Miss's weakness right now is their pass defense, and that's Auburn's weakness is their pass offense. And if Auburn can have some success throwing the ball around, Auburn can still run the ball, and they can still play good defense and the home crowd at night game. And I've been telling you for this for a long time. Freeze. This is Freeze's Super Bowl this year, and he's gonna have his best game plan. I think they're gonna play their best game of the year this weekend. I really do.
Wow. The quarterback situation at Auburn, they had 5 or 6 games in a row, Bo and Yancy, where Auburn had failed to pass for 100 yards or more against a Power 5 opponent. Alternating quarterbacks, here it is this late in the season. Auburn's 0-3 in the SEC for the first time since 2012. How's Auburn going to get an offense? And Ole Miss's defense, they've been sacking some quarterbacks too.
They really have. I always love the Auburn Ole Miss game, and Yancey's been around this. And then they've got that. They're warming up for that big Ole Miss route of Vanderbilt next week.
Yeah,
in Oxford. But no, you're right, Rob. They've got to get something going on offense, and Yancey Ole Miss's defense has played pretty well this year, except for the LSU game. Maybe the offense lent that to them. But it's those two teams, even though they're not really Georgia Auburn, Alabama Auburn traditional rivals, they get after each other pretty hard.
Yeah, it comes again. It all comes on Auburn's offense being the ability to throw the ball. If they can't throw the ball around, it's going to be a long night for Auburn, no doubt about it. But you look at last year, which was a team that was probably not. I don't know, Rob. You followed Auburn closer than I did last season, but that was. If not on par this year, a little bit weaker team than this year as a whole. And, they put up 31 points at Ole Miss. Robbie Ashford had a really good day. Definitely his best game of his career at Auburn. I know it's been short-lived, 2 years for Robbie Ashford there. But,
yeah,
they put a scare in Ole Miss. We have seen some really bad Auburn teams beat some good Ole Miss teams. I've always said, that Arkansas brings out the worst in Ole Miss for some reason. And if there's a 1A, it's Auburn. Ole Miss just historically does not play well against Auburn. And, maybe that's the pessimist side of me saying that I expect it to be tight and Auburn play a great game and maybe Ole Miss rolls them like LSU did. And you're kind of giggling about it. But, just historically, Ole Miss just does not play Auburn well. But the whole game will come down to Auburn's ability to throw the ball. Ole Miss has not played very good in the pass defense. Now the run defense is the totally opposite. They're very good run defensively, and you're right that they do get after the passers. So I think this is a Robbie Ashford game. I really do. I don't think they can go with the other quarterback and have a lot of success. And you got to remember now, Ashford was committed to Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin came in and he dropped him, and his mom was really, really upset about it. And he's going to carry a chip on his shoulder as he did last year when he faces Ole Miss.
Well, I mean, he could have a pile of chips on his shoulder. I don't know if it's going to matter. I mean, Auburn's receivers, I'm not sure, but they struggle. I don't know if it's the quarterback struggling or the receivers or it's both, but their offense just, I think you saw what Auburn was in the second game of the year against Cal when they had to fight like hell to get a 14-10 win over Cal. And Cal's not a great team, but anyway, Ole Miss, I know I'm looking ahead, Yancy. They got the game coming up in Athens. Georgia's got a tough stretch ahead. They got to play Florida. They got to play Ole Miss and Oxford. November 18th, opening day of duck season in the great state of Arkansas. 30 minutes before sunrise. Big Tex is telling you now, have your license so you don't get a fine. But Yancy, that I'm looking ahead. Okay, Ole Miss, that win in '96, nobody gave them a chance. Brock Kreitz, Walker Jones, Ron Hines wore down at midfield. And you got to play, but I'm just looking ahead. Ole Miss, watch out for this team. I mean, they're something. They lost to Alabama 24-10, but Ulysses Bentley, the fourth, and Quinshon Judkins, you're starting to see that 1-2 punch. But Ole Miss has played some of their tougher games early in the season, and it's not going to be like it was last year. I think this Ole Miss could have a 9-win, 10-win season.
Yeah, if they don't have a 9-win season, regular season, it would be very, very disappointing, honestly. And I don't know if you're including the bowl in that scenario or not.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you're talking about the regular season. So,
yeah,
I mean, they really should. But it all comes down to this Auburn game. If they win this Auburn game, and then it's going to get very, very interesting. And, they should be headed to Georgia, 8-1. And it's going to be, it's going to be for all the marbles. And, like you said, Bowers is out. Ole Miss is really starting to find that running game that I was harping on earlier this season. Bentley has emerged, and that has really helped out and probably kind of motivated Judkins, right? So
yeah,
it's things are really, Lane is really seeming to get this team to gel at the right time. Dart's playing at an extremely high level. It all came down to Ole Miss finding that offensive line again and getting that running game going. Now, it's only 2 weeks that they've had some success in the running game, but it is back-to-back games, and that'll be something to kind of watch for against Auburn. Auburn's strength is, stopping the run itself. They've had some injuries. I know that Freeze said Austin Keys probably is not going to be available for this game. Austin grew up 5 miles from Hattiesburg, where I grew up, and played at a high level there for Ole Miss and transferred to Auburn this past year. And I'm sure he's really, really, really disappointed not being able to play in this game. But I think kind of this is the circle swing game for Ole Miss is this Saturday.
Bo?
Yeah, I was going to say, Yancy, I had to see Ulysses Bentley play for SMU for 3 years. He really came on. He had some injury problems, and his junior, he rushed for over 600 yards and was their number 2. He really sort of gave them a running attack. And boy, he's got some speed. in the open field and some good moves. So, I mean, I think he might be playing on Sundays after this year's over if he does. And I was thinking back, you guys remember, Yancy, you probably weren't born, the 1971 Ole Miss Auburn famed Gator Bowl, Pat Sullivan against Archie Manning. What a gosh, 35-28. That was the most entertaining bowl of the entire season. So they go. I'm sure that Pat Sullivan's be watching from heaven, I guess, or whatever.
Well, you know what's crazy about that game, Bo, is that in Yancy in that 1970 Gator Bowl, I mean, Auburn won both head coaches. A little bit of idiot savant trivia here. Get pen and paper handy. Johnny Vaught had, I believe, a heart attack, was in the hospital, and Shug Jordan had an emergency appendectomy. And so Paul Davis coached for Auburn, and I think the kindly and affable Bruiser Kennard coached for Ole Miss. And Archie Manning also played that game with his arm in a cast. I mean, you know, but Yancy, I tell you, Ole Miss, this is what gets me. The loss against Alabama 24-10, something happened in that game with Ole Miss. You talked about Jake Thornton, the offensive line coach, is gone. He's at Auburn now. Ole Miss ran zone blocking. Now they're running man. They figured something out. Talk about this evolution of the Ole Miss team since the loss in Tuscaloosa.
Well, you know, they started mixing in some zone plays again, which we talked about. They changed the offensive schemes to man-on-man this season with the new offensive line coach that came in from NC State, Garrison. So they're not going straight zone blocking, but when they're not, it's about 50-50 right now, which it was about 100-0 before. So they've got the old blocking schemes in there. And then when they're not going zone, there's no slow developing plays. There's no jet sweeps, hesitating with the running backs, looking for holes to open up. They're quick developing plays. They're just hitting the hole. And obviously with Bentley, he doesn't, he's not, there's no hesitating with him. He runs like he's been out of a shotgun. So his development has been huge. Bentley came in from SMU. He had back-to-back 1,000-plus yard rushing seasons, 20, I think 6 TDs in those 2 years, and, came in with high expectations. And then the second game of the season, he broke his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And, he misses the next 9 games. And then Judkins was a true freshman. They had, Zach Evans, that transferred from TCU, the 5-star running back. And then when Bentley came back, you missed 9 out of your 12 games. Zach Evans and Judkins had already taken over that 1-2 punch. So Bentley, I believe, had a total of maybe 12, 13 rushes last year.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just, he was shelled. And so then you look at this year, it comes up, and for whatever reason, Bentley was getting a few carries a game, but Judkins was struggling. And 2 games ago, they increased Bentley's role, and all of a sudden, Buddha, not Zach, but Judkins starts running much better, starting with that LSU game. So, competition brings the best out of everyone. And it wasn't only that Judkins just decided, I'm going to start trying to run. That LSU game is after that Alabama game. I think Lane had a long talk with Garrison and said, hey, we've got to start doing some blocking schemes that have worked so well my first 3 years here. Let's start mixing in some zone blocking runs here and schematically, and let's throw out all this slow developing runs, and let's start hitting the holes quickly. And they've been averaging close to 300 yards rushing the last 2 games.
Yeah, let me say something real quick about a couple of our sponsors. RumbleBoxingGym.com, 1835 Union Avenue, Midtown Memphis. Open every day of the week. Weekdays, they crank it up about 5 a.m. 48 people in those classes with elite instructors. These classes are 15 3-minute bites. You're doing calisthenics, burpees, jumping jacks, planks, push-ups, dips, dumbbells. Then you're hitting these 250-pound punching bags. It's an incredible workout. I would say it's like swimming a mile and a half or something. You will get out and be like, wow, I just accomplished something. All the gear, everything you need is there. Midtown Memphis and Camp Lee, first of 3 locations. Check them out on our website, rumbleboxinggym.com. It's at the sidelines.live website. Also, Hewlett and Dunn, boot and clothing company. Check out these new camouflage long pants that I got yesterday. They've got them from Duckhead, and they fit. They got them in all sizes. They also have some great outdoor upland pants. They've got Filson. They got over 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots. They have Pendleton, Schaefer outdoors. They've got Old South Devil Dog jeans. If you're a size 40, you wear a 38. Already make you feel better. You lose 2 sizes just by buying a pair of them. Hewlett and Dunn open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m., 6 p.m. The day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, that weekend, from Thanksgiving weekend through New Year's to the end of the year, they're open Sundays, 1 to 5 p.m. They have Charles Hall, his wife Laura, Raven, the crew out there. They are first class. They're great people. You will love going there. I was out there yesterday at the store checking it out. They're getting 40, 50 boxes a day of new stuff in there. They've got Hiawassee socks. They've got the greatest selection of boot socks and hunting socks, Filson luggage, STS gear. Check it out. Men's and women's clothing, first class all the way. Yancy, you know, looking at Ole Miss, wow, they're 8. Let's say they're 8-1 going into Georgia.
Yeah,
and they beat Georgia. I mean, I think Lane Kiffin. What Lane Kiffin is, he's like an insurance policy. At the bottom, the worst you're going to get is 7 or 8 wins a year, and a couple of key players. Yeah, a couple of key players here or there. I mean, this team, you know, and I'm looking at it from Auburn going, you know, you don't want to get into, like last week, the only chance Auburn had against LSU was keep the score down below 30. Right. Get them out of their comfort zone.
And LSU is not going to score below 30 against anybody. That's the best offense in the country. Everybody keeps talking about, well, you didn't play good defense against LSU. I've heard this. Auburn say that. Ole Miss, nobody's going to play good defense against LSU. It might be the best offense I've seen in, I don't know, years. It's just a shame they don't have, you know, they played well against Auburn, but it was Auburn, right?
Yeah.
On defensively. I mean, if they could just put up anything similar to that, right, they would win the national championship this year. That offense is just, wow.
Well, you know, playing on LSU's offense this year reminds me of that movie about bull riding, 8 seconds.
That's right. That's right.
Well, the margins they've got really 3 number 1 receivers now. And I still think Jaden's playing the best of anybody in the country. And their offensive line is playing great. The emergence of, you know, the running back that's from Louisiana that, you know, transferred in from Notre Dame, Diggs there. I mean, that's a special offense. It really is. And that's, you know, and that's why I'm so glad we're going to a 12-game playoff, because you get someone like that in the playoffs and they got a shot to win it. Right now they've got no shot to get the playoffs this year, but you know what, are they still at 2 losses or did they get to 3? I think they're still at 2 losses. You know, you get a shot at the playoffs. You run the table, you beat an Alabama, right? You go to the SEC championship, you win that. I mean, heck, they'll still be taught that they could make the playoffs. Will they get in it too? Probably not. But you know, they beat Alabama. Ole Miss loses to Georgia. They go to the SEC championship game. They win that in a 12-team playoffs. They're in a shoe-in to get in, and then they're getting a little bit better defensively. So that's why you got to go to a 12-team playoffs. You can't, you know, you got to have the best team, you know, having a shot to win it all. So you know, LSU's dangerous.
Yeah, they really are. And Bo, he referenced about Jaden Daniels.
Yes.
And I've been saying this year with the SEC doesn't have elite quarterback play. We do now with Jaden Daniels. He's and I'm with Yancy. Expand on that. Agree or disagree?
No, I was going to say I agree totally. Yancy, you'll remember too, when Les Miles or LSU's the only team to win the BCS or the college football playoff with 2 losses. They got hot. You know, so like Major League Baseball. Unfortunately, the Texas Rangers got cold all of a sudden. Caps and I jinxed them the last 2 nights, but they I mean, they got on a roll, won the SEC championship, and then just kept going from there. But no, there's no doubt the SEC has a bunch of elite quarterbacks. Jackson Dart, I think at Ole Miss, Yancy runs the offense as efficiently as anybody did. Had a couple of bad breaks in that Alabama game, but that guy, I mean, he's a USC transfer, world class quarterback, and again, I think he'll probable pro prospect. So, and he's just gotten better and better. He was a little rusty there when he first came in, but he's continuing to improve game by game.
Yeah. He really, I mean, the first thing with Dart is just how tough he is, right? I mean, that's and Ole Miss has been blessed with tough quarterbacks, for a number of years now. With Dart these last couple of years and Matt Corral, we know how tough he was. And then you had Chad Kelly, nobody tougher than Chad Kelly. One thing that people didn't realize about Eli Manning is how much he played like a dog. Now, he didn't run around and he was a drop back quarterback, but I mean he took a hit as good as anybody. So they've had a run now for the last 20 years of really tough quarterbacks, and Dart definitely fits that mold. The thing about him is this quarterback draft coming up, they're saying that there could be as many as 9 first-round quarterbacks in this year's draft. And so, you would think that would be a great opportunity for someone like Dart to come out, but they don't predict Dart. They still don't have him until 6th, 7th round. They got him anywhere from the number 18 and number 31 quarterback in the draft in this year. And then next year's draft, they're saying it's going to be historically bad draft for quarterbacks. So you're going from the best, historically quarterback draft this year to next year. So that probably is going to push Dart into next year's draft. And obviously that's going to be a huge benefit for Ole Miss next season. You have Dart coming back. You have Trey Harris, you have, Judkins coming back. You got 3 of those offensive linemen coming back, a lot of the defensive linemen. So a lot of people have been pointing towards that 24 season for Ole Miss as the year that they really got a chance to be special under Lane Kiffin. So, them doing it this year, setting up, even if they don't make the playoffs, but really making that run for the playoffs could lead to bigger and better things in that season for the Rebels.
Yeah, and throwing something in here, Rocky in Friars Point, Mississippi. You know where that is, don't you, Yancy?
Oh, yeah. Doing
right above
Jonestown
Jonestown.
For 28 years, I've learned every nook and cranny town.
Exactly.
In the Southeast, I think.
Right.
I don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what state it is. I've heard it.
Yeah.
He says Yancy and the Rebel Yell Hotline rock. I would agree. Catch them. Yancy Porter, Chuck Roundsville, Gary Darby, Harry Harrison, Gordon Ford when he can be there. The whole crew, Rebel Yell Hotline, Monday nights, 6 p.m. Sports 56 WHBQ and Super Talk Mississippi. It's an awesome show. Just need more time, but also just listen to it. I'm telling you, you will learn a lot. I like this. Another one, Connor in Memphis. Rebels need, in all caps, to NIL the top defensive lineman. I guess that means to go put some packages together, and they'll be in the CFP in 24. You got one coming in, Kamarion Franklin, out of Lake Cormorant, Mississippi, 48 miles from campus. Talk about him and other defensive linemen a guy like that can attract, because living in Memphis, there's a lot of Ole Miss fans around. Got fans of everybody. Memphis is the UN of sports fans. But you Kamarion Franklin, I would think other elite defensive linemen took notice of that commitment this summer.
Yeah, man. They've got the top 4 defensive linemen in the state of Mississippi committed right now. And all of them are top 150 prospects.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but say that again. That I did not know that. That is a powerful statement for Ole Miss fans. I hope they're listening, because I get asked this question 8 days a week and every month of Sundays.
Yeah, so they've got the top 4 defensive linemen ranked wise in the state of Mississippi right now. They're all top 150 prospects. William Eccles out of there in Houston, Mississippi. He just got offered by Alabama, and Georgia's rumored to be about to pull the trigger with him as well. So I'm sure things will get dicey with him, but he has two sisters at Ole Miss and one that plays sports. And I think things will look good in the end. But anytime Alabama and Georgia start coming after you here, it's definitely going to make some anxious moments. But you got Cam Beavers, down there in Bay Springs, Mississippi. And, he's a load now. They've got, you talked about Cam Franklin, and they've got, Rush down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and Moss Point. I think he's ranked number 98 by On3 Sports right now in the country. They've got some really, really good defensive linemen, and everybody that comes to the SEC, including Lane, learns that you be able to be really, really strong on that defensive front to have a chance, no matter how good you are offensively. So Lane is, arguably his top recruiter is Joyner, that came over from Ohio State, and he's done a bang up job there on the defensive line for Ole Miss, and he's an incredible recruiter. So, they're kind of hanging their hat on this 24 class with that defensive line class.
Well, it's unbelievable what you just said. And Bo, when you say you've got the top 4 defensive linemen in the state of Mississippi, because they put out a lot of great talent. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, the offense, it's nothing's, easy, but with Lane Kiffin, you're always going to have an offense. He figures it out. Bo, if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'm really fired up because that game tomorrow night at Auburn's big, and I know historically they don't do too well, at Auburn, but this is a historically poor Auburn offense, and if there's ever a chance to get back-to-back wins for the first time in a long time, this would be, obviously, as an Auburn man, I want Auburn to win, but I'm looking at it objectively. Ole Miss is only a 6.5-point favorite. It'll be a tough game. I just, trying to compete with what they do on offense, Yancy and Bo, is tough for anybody. And just for the average fan that didn't have a dog in the hunt, wasn't an Ole Miss or an LSU fan, one of the most exciting games I've seen all year was Ole Miss 55, LSU 49. That was a hell of a night.
Right. It was worth it, Yancy, getting the fine. And I saw they had another $75,000 for stopping plays. So at least, thank goodness, they weren't throwing the mustard bottles at Lane Kiffin this time, like Knoxville. But no, and Yancy, you made a great point there, Rob, too. The I don't know what it is. The state of Mississippi has always had great defensive linemen. Going back, 40, 50 years, even back to the pre-integration days. I mean, they're I don't know what, maybe must be the cornbread and the buttermilk, I guess. Yes, I don't know what. It's you look there. There's always an all-conference or all-America guy coming out of the high school ranks. I don't know what they just grow them bigger down there.
Yeah, and Yancy, you referenced Ole Miss's tough quarterbacks. Think about all the guys like Charlie Connerly out of Clarksdale that they got out of Mississippi. Kyle Rote Jr. Kyle Rote Jr. told me over at the pool last year at the Y, we were swimming. He said, his dad, Kyle Rote Sr., played for the Giants, and he said we'd come home in the summer. You had to have jobs. To supplement it, and they'd come to Memphis and Clarksdale because Charlie Connerly was his teammate. There's a pipeline, Mississippi to New York, and Memphis. I consider Memphis to be TAM, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi.
Yeah.
And now listen to Paul Tudor Jones. I love to listen to brilliant people, motivation speakers. Paul Tudor Jones, talks about, growing up in the South and in Memphis, Mississippi per capita, I think it's the most philanthropic state in America. It's just, and I still go back, the most magical day in the history of the state of Mississippi for college football was a cool, crisp 46-degree morning because we limited out on Dove down in Lambert, Mississippi. We went to Big Abe's Barbecue in Clarksdale for lunch, and Mississippi State pounded A&M that day. And later, my 16-year-old son, I didn't know he'd snuck out and drove down with some friends to Oxford for the Ole Miss Alabama game, and he stormed the field with everybody. Yancy, Bo, would y'all agree that's the most magical day ever in the state of Mississippi for both schools?
Well, I mean, the Alabama 14 game was, absolutely a special day for Ole Miss. But it's just as far as game, excitement and everything going on, I still think that LSU game this year is the best game I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, this year it's better than the 29-point lead that Colorado surrendered to Stanford the other day. But I mean, Bo, would you agree?
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
55-49.
And Yancy, the Ole Miss Georgia game has a chance. Alabama still holds the record, 28 consecutive wins during SEC days post 1933. Mississippi State ended it in Jackson 6-3 in that famous 1980 game. But Georgia's pushing; they're 24 right now. I think the third longest winning streak. So the Rebels could do a little bit of make a little more history there by knocking them off there in November. So it's boy, there's so many things. Plus, I guess Bowers is out indefinitely with had to have surgery on his ankle thanks to a out of bound tackle against poor Vandy last week.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That game, and normally you would not be talking about a tight end making that big of an impact for an offense or a team. But Bowers he's one of the top 5 players in the country, any position.
Yeah.
He stirs the drink. They don't win that Auburn game without Bowers. So, there's a lot at stake, but I know that Auburn struggled. But who did Auburn play before Georgia?
Before Georgia?
Yeah.
They had played A&M on the road in College Station.
Oh, so
played really, really poorly. Kind of like this situation that they're facing right now when they went to LSU, and everybody thought that Georgia was just going to absolutely maul Georgia. And, Auburn could have won that game. If it wasn't for Bowers, they would have won that game. So, when you get beat like that and everybody tells you how bad you are all week long, it pisses you off.
It does.
And so there couldn't be a better situation for freezing them to really get their attention before this Ole Miss game than to get waxed like they did, just like they did at A&M and say, this is what everybody thinks about you. This is who you are, and freeze one of his greatest assets, scheming X's and O's and recruiting, definitely. But he's a great motivator. And I'm just telling you, I expect Auburn to come out and play their best game Saturday. And if they get that passing game going, and I know that's hard to imagine Auburn being able to get the passing game going, but look at what Robbie Ashford did last year against Ole Miss. I mean, he hasn't looked like that any other game in his career at Auburn, throwing the ball around. If he can get some passing game going, it's going to be a dogfight. I'm just telling you.
Yeah. And, there's a couple of sayings we use in the stock market and equity markets: buy at the wake, sell at the wedding. You buy the bad news and you sell the good news when the earnings come out. The other one is dead cat bounce, and that's, the thing about Ole Miss's offense is Lane Kiffin, they're relentless. That they're hard to figure out. But, Alabama did, Kevin Steele did, Curtis McGriff is not going to be on the field, crime dog, something. He's stepping away temporarily from football. All you got to do is look from 10,000 feet above. I'm sure those coaching meetings with the defensive coaches aren't real pleasant when you give up 48 points to LSU. So a lot of storylines, Yancy. It's going to be a fun one. Hey, man, we've run out of time. Let me say, most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We are blessed. And I love it how Yancy always says, have a blessed day. We're blessed to have all y'all viewers, listeners, and all of our sponsors like Gateway Tire and Service Center. We go the distance for our communities and our customers where we are. Boy Scouts of America, Reforest, Mississippi. And I'm going to tell you something. Check out Yancy Porter Monday night, 6 o'clock, Sports 56 WHBQ in Memphis and Super Talk, Mississippi. And Bo Carter, both of y'all tag out, and we'll be back tomorrow. But thanks all of y'all for helping us make Sidelines the best show possible.
Yancy, lead the way there, sir.
Yep, we lost Yancy there.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Bo Carter on X, Twitter, Bo Carter 52, sportspagedallas.com, and the Texas Sports Daily, all over the place.
Well, and I think what happened was on Twitter, I'm seeing now where it just says you're not retweeting, you're reposting. So I guess it's X. There was no real, ceremony or any press conference or anything about them changing the name, but follow us on Twitter at @sidelines_live. And again, thanks all of our sponsors, Red River Ford Toyota, House Industries, Tom Martin Body Shop, Rumble Boxing, Gateway Tire and Service Center, Boy Scouts of America, Reforest, Mississippi, Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company, Web Footy Kennel, Gaddis Home Innovation, Miss Rubens Rubs, May Veterinary Clinic, Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. All of y'all, thank you. We're out of here. And as soon as I can hit this end button, we're going to end it. We'll see you tomorrow.